Are you a real estate investor looking to sharpen your skills or a newbie looking to become one? You're in the right place. Welcome to Where Should I Invest? Real Estate Investing in Canada with your host, Sarah Larbi.
Hey, and welcome back to another episode of Where Should I Invest with Sarah Larbi. So George Masri is my guest for today, and he actually has a podcast of his own too. He is a realtor, an investor, good friend, and has just really been doing some great things and super helpful to other newer investors. He always is looking out and helping, and just like an overall like really awesome guy. So super excited to have him on my show. And guys, if you enjoy this podcast, if you wouldn't mind leaving a rating and a review, and even just send me a message on Instagram at Investor Sarah Larbi and let me know if there is something I can do to help. George, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks. How are you?
Good. I'm super excited to have you on. And you've had me on two separate podcasts of yours. I think one was like more of a show, one was a podcast. You've been on the Right Club podcast, and now you are on Where Should I Invest. Super excited to have you, and welcome.
Thank you. So actually, you were my first ever guest, which was kind of like an interview that I recorded and put on YouTube. I've got the most views on that one out of anything I put out there. So thank you for being on it and launching the Well Off podcast for me.
That's awesome. Now, if somebody wanted to listen to Well Off, I know I end with this, but while we're talking about it, where can they go?
welloffpodcast.ca, or you can just check it out on iTunes. It's available pretty much anywhere where you can listen to podcasts.
Very cool. Awesome. So, George, I know you, but maybe some listeners don't. And can you just let us know who you are and what you do?
Sure. Yeah. So I am a realtor. I just recently made a switch actually to Keller Williams Signature. So I'm working with a new company now. I work with investors, I work with homeowners, and I think really I find joy in helping people get started in investing for the most part. And so that's kind of what I do. I'm an investor myself. I own a couple properties in Hamilton, and looking forward to buying more.
Very cool. I actually didn't know that you switched over to KW. That's probably recent.
Yeah, so this was like less than a week ago.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Awesome. So I always say, definitely work with a realtor that's an investor friendly realtor, ideally also an investor themselves. Why do you think that's important?
There's obvious reasons, but I think for the most part, I would say a huge advantage would be creativity. So I think like there are always solutions to things that maybe some people don't understand if you're just a typical realtor. For example, I had a situation once, it wasn't for an investor, it was a typical homeowner, but they wanted to purchase a property, but conditional on the sale of their home. And that's something that doesn't really happen anymore today, but we found a way to make that work, which we had to get kind of creative. And we said like, okay, for the first month, you're not allowed to sell it to anyone else, but after that period of time, which gives her time to sell her property, after that time, you can accept other offers. So it was kind of like a compromise that made it work. That's the kind of creativity I'm sort of talking about.
Very cool. Now I want to also talk about, so, you're an investor and you're active and you're buying property. When did you get started investing and what is your strategy?
Yeah, I started in 2017. Bought my first place in September. It was kind of a fluke because I didn't know anything about Hamilton at the time. It was just in my price range. And I had a lot of troubles with that home, but things worked out in the end. And I had just learned about the BRRRR strategy at that time. Like I was brand new to the whole idea of refinancing and recycling your capital. So I did it on that property, and I did it again on the second property. And I think that's probably the most useful strategy today, given the atmosphere and the mortgage rules and everything that's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, so you're a realtor as like your full-time job, and then you do investing. There's probably a lot of people thinking out there, okay, I'm a realtor too, and maybe I'd like to get into real estate from a financial standpoint. Like, is there anything that you had to prepare or any specific, I mean, I know you're not a mortgage broker at all, and I'm not saying that, your advice is the be all and end all, but in your opinion, was it a little bit harder because you were self-employed?
Oh yeah, definitely. It was really hard, and I had to jump through a lot of hoops to actually get the mortgage. And actually, the mortgage broker that I worked with. So again, this was my first deal for myself. He had told me that I was good to go with 10% down. So I was actually going to live in the property, by the way. And because I had ran into so many issues and stuff, I had to change my mind later. But yeah, he tells me 10% down, you're good. I waive conditions. Then he goes, oh, wait, sorry, you got to go 20%. So come up with an extra 10. And you got to do this, this, and that. There were a bunch of conditions. So I just realized how important it was to have like a trustworthy mortgage broker and do things right.
Yeah, absolutely. So curious, how did you come up with the extra 10%?
I had to just kind of like find a way to make it work, right? Again, just had to get creative, and yeah, it wasn't easy, but it worked out in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you ever look at, I mean, as you're scaling, and I don't know if this is something that has crossed your mind at this point, but just even for me, I think that cash is the easiest thing to find. And I know this sounds insane, but it's a
Hmm.
lot easier to find than mortgage holders, as an example. But there's a lot of people with RSPs,
Hmm.
and they have it in like mutual funds, not making a whole lot. What's your take about, using RSP funds to fund some of the deals as a second mortgage?
As in, like, as an investor using your RSPs to fund.
Not your own, you can't, but just somebody else's.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, if yeah, we're talking about an investor who's looking to loan out their RSPs to someone else,
Right.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a really good option for people to earn. You can earn a pretty decent interest on that, and it's fairly safe considering that it's backed by the house itself. So I think as an investor, if you're earning 1, 2, or 3% in a bank account somewhere, you're way better off loaning out your money. And tons of people that I know and that have done that before. Active investors that have extra cash laying around. I've heard that of tons of people who are actually loaning it out as a mortgage.
Yeah, I actually I moved mine over to Community Trust. I know there's Olympia Trust and there's Community Trust,
Hmm.
and I'm going to be loaning it out at like 10% for some people, and then more for others, depending on what
Yeah.
the deal is. But there's definitely some good opportunities. Like for me, the RSP piece it wasn't because I originally loved the idea of an RSP, but my company matched it.
Hmm.
And so I'm like, it's free money. For every dollar I put in up to a certain percentage, it was matched like $1 or $1.25 or something. I'm like, I'm gonna
Yeah.
take it. But now I have this money and I'm like, I really like to invest in real estate. Personally, this is just my personal opinion.
Hmm.
What do I do with my RSP? And it was just kind of, not really getting the same type of ROI that obviously real estate was getting for me. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna loan it out.
Yeah, that's awesome. What's your criteria for loaning out your RSPs?
Well, I mean, at this point in time, I think it's just based on people that I know and that I trust, and like
Hmm.
properties or areas that I'm aware of. Like at this point, I was actually talking to somebody yesterday, and it's going to be in Brantford, so I'm pretty well versed in the area.
Hmm.
Criteria wise, I don't know. To be honest, like it's like I care about the money, but I care more about my real estate assets than my
Yeah.
RSP.
Yeah, for sure. So as long as it's someone that you trust and that you're pretty comfortable doing a deal and getting a 10% return.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, one of the things, because I did want to talk to you about, like the financing piece, but like, have you come across any other challenges in acquiring properties, or even just doing the renovation on the BRRRRs?
Mhm. I think for me, it's been a little bit slower than I would like. In a perfect world, I would have taken on a bunch of projects and just used other people's money and done that. But I think at this stage, and I think a lot of people are kind of here with me, it's doing that first joint venture. And I know that once I get past that first one, the opportunities will open up because I know I have the knowledge and the ability to find good deals because I can evaluate properties. So that piece is there. It's just finding that money and putting the pieces together. That's been a bit of a challenge.
What kind of JV partner are you looking for?
Ideally, somebody who doesn't want to get involved too much in the process. And I know that from my point of view, I've got to put deals together, and I've been working on that and having everything set up and having a plan in place so that I can actually attract somebody rather than just talking about something random, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, it's like because we have podcasts and you probably get, emails as well. I have to be like I prefer to just be really picky with people that I JV with because well, at this point in time, it's more of an option. It's not a mandatory thing for me to keep scaling because I still have financing ability and money. But when people approach me, like it really would have to be the right person because you're
Mhm.
stuck with them for like 5 to 7 years and they're stuck with you for 5 to 7 years. And so
Hmm.
it's just really important that you like talk through the exit strategies and all of the how and who's going to do what. And maybe this is the wrong thing, but I would rather have a JV partner. And this is totally wrong. And everyone's going to be like, why would you do that? But I would like to like kind of show them the ropes along the way.
Right. So for you to be actually showing your partner how you would do things?
Yeah, like do it. Like I would kind of mentor them throughout
Right.
the whole process. To me, that sounds, I know it's like maybe more time consuming, but it's like way more fun. And
True. Well, actually,
thrown
that
after.
makes sense because you're kind of leveraging by doing that. You're kind of delegating the tasks to that person if you trust them, which
Yeah.
which you're really good at, by the way. Like I don't know if it comes naturally to you, but you're really good at delegating tasks from what I've seen.
That is like that is like my main thing. I'm a master
Yeah.
delegator, and I don't know if I should be proud of that or not, but like I will delegate everything that I possibly can, unless it's something that I can't delegate. So like,
Right.
like why, I don't know, like do you have things that you delegate and chores that you don't like to do that you delegate? Because you probably do. I mean, when you think about it, like
Mhm.
we don't have to be working the $10 hour, $20 hour,
Yeah.
$30 hour jobs, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you, but I think a lot of people have trouble delegating, including myself. And I try to realize why that's the case. And I think it's probably because of the way that I grew up. And my father was someone who always said, like, hey, do it yourself. Why would you pay somebody else? He was coming from a good place, like he's trying to help me. So I think that those thoughts stuck with me, and now I'm starting to let that go and just think my time is worth more than this $10 an hour job, like you just mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes that's the thing, right? And I have some students that will say, well, I've got a property and every time something happens, I'm like, why? Because they're like, we're saving money. I'm like, no, you're not.
Yeah,
Because if you take that time and you do something productive with it, I mean, if you're going to take that time and you're just going to sit there and not do anything productive
hmm,
in return, then you might as well go do it. But if you're actually going to say, okay, I've got 2 hours that I've now saved because I didn't have to go to this property and I don't know, fix whatever small things that a handyman
yeah,
can do for super cheap. Take that time and like listen to podcasts or go to networking events or
hmm,
analyze some deals or, send offers in or something along
yeah.
those lines. I think you'll just be further ahead if you're working on the business rather than in the business.
Yeah, exactly. And for some people, that might be like go to your kid's soccer game or, spend time with your family, something like that. And that could be much more valuable than
Yeah,
fixing a toilet, right?
that's a great point too. Like it doesn't
Mhm.
even have to be real estate related. It could just be, like you said, perfect example. Spend time with your kids, spend time with
Yeah.
your family.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing that I'm noticing is it's really important to build systems so that you can delegate your tasks. Because, for example, you talked about your podcast editing, and we were talking about that a bit earlier. If you just sent out or reached out to someone and said, "Hey, I need you to edit my podcast," they'd be like, "Oh, well, what do you want me to do? I don't understand." But if you have a system in place and it's all broken down into the steps that you've taken, then that makes it so much easier to delegate.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I used to only be able to put out like a podcast a month because it was like
Yeah,
every podcast I did, there'd be like 5 or 6 hours around it just to like get it
yeah,
ready and edit. And I'm just like, I'll still book my own because I still want to pick and choose who comes on the show
hmm,
and make sure that like they're, the right fit. Because sometimes you'll get like emails from people and it's like something random in the US that like doesn't even apply here. I'm like, sorry, like it just
yeah,
it just doesn't work.
yeah,
But I mean,
exactly.
other than that, I don't need to be editing for like 5 hours.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
So okay, so cool. So what's the next step for you? Like where do you want to be in 5 years? What's the next acquisitions when it comes to investing in real estate?
Mm. Yeah, I set some goals maybe 2 weeks ago. I spent like a good half a day just kind of figuring out what I wanted to do. And I decided that I'm going to aim for 5 properties next year to acquire 5 properties. And one of them will be with my personal funds because I do kind of want to have my own deals with my
Hmm.
own money. And then I'd like to get 4 with joint venture partners. So that's the goal for 2020, along with other things that are kind of like, real estate sales related or family or whatever other goals. So that's the main one for 2020.
Okay, so that's interesting. So are you looking for like single families, multifamilies,
Yeah,
anything
I,
else?
I think I've had like success with single families right now, and I don't want to get into a totally different strategy of like conversions or whatever. I think I'm just going to stick with what I've done and had success with, and later on, if I choose to do something else, then I'll go for it. But yeah, single family BRRRR.
Okay, that's awesome.
Mhm.
Now, when you BRRRR, like, what do you look for? Because I have a specific like type of property that I like to
Yeah,
get, aka ones that don't require a whole lot of permit pulling. But
yeah.
what do you look for?
Yeah, similar. So the second property I bought was a one bedroom detached bungalow, and it was like literally less than 500 square feet. And the reason I bought it is because I actually lived in it. Um, but now I realize that that's a mistake. I shouldn't be buying one bedroom homes. Moving forward, it's going to be at least 3 bedrooms, 2 plus stories, and probably all brick. I don't really like the vinyl siding homes. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on, and that helps to really narrow down the criteria so I can target specifically what I want.
Now, do you have a specific area too?
Yeah, right now I'm interested. Hamilton's a little bit pricey for single family. Like it's kind of hard to make that work,
Yeah.
but I'm looking at a few in Welland and St. Catharines. Those are two interesting places.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
I'm there like almost every like other weekend too, just
Yeah.
looking at some properties with a couple people there, and I mean Hamilton too, and Brantford too, and Simcoe. Like
Mhm.
I actually like Simcoe too, and Peterborough. But any other areas other than St. Catharines and Welland that you like?
I'm trying to just stay focused because I don't want to be like I don't want to own properties here and then have one in Barrie and have
Yeah,
one in Oshawa, right? Like I'd rather just stay focused in an area so it's easier for the future.
yeah, one team. You
Yeah,
don't need to
exactly.
find a different plumber for every single town.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. So I think you've got a girlfriend, right? You've got a
Yes.
fiance. Okay. So, question: are you guys both into real estate?
Yeah, she's actually also a realtor.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so she's kind of yeah, that's the interesting thing. Like we're starting to open up to the idea of both of us being more involved in investing because I don't think that was her mindset before. So we've actually both rented out our homes and collectively we're renting ourselves as tenants. So
Okay.
we found a spot. We're in Mississauga, which is a little bit pricier to purchase, and instead of putting all of our capital into our primary residence, we decided let's just rent. We'll be able to save our money and invest it into other areas where it's more affordable and the numbers make more sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a huge believer of that. Like if somebody wants to live in Toronto or Vancouver, by all
Mhm.
means, like go ahead, rent. Hopefully, I mean, rents there are really crazy right now,
Yeah,
regardless. But, if you rent and you stay somewhere and you stay there for a long time, at some point you'll be below market rents. But,
yeah,
invest where it makes sense and then just live where you want.
yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people have a hard time understanding that, including my now fiance. Actually, she kept telling me like, I own a place. Why would I go to rent somewhere? I'm telling all my clients that they should buy this and that, but it's not the same thing. If you're renting, you're freeing up your capital for cash flow positive investments, whereas your primary residence is sucking money out of your account. Right? It's the rich dad poor dad main principle, basically.
Yeah, unless you're house hacking though.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
I would say there are some exceptions, but
Yeah,
yeah, house hacking being one of them.
that's true. Good point.
Very cool. So, okay, so that's good. I always like to, sometimes I like to ask just to see like, are people on the same page? Are people not on the same page? Because I get asked a lot of questions like, how do I get my wife or my husband or my boyfriend or my girlfriend
Mhm.
into real estate? Do you have any advice for them?
I would say, like for example, with me and Mandy, she's not really into numbers, and she's not really interested in the whole becoming an owner of 25 properties or whatever. So if there's one person that can take that on and maybe another person is able to generate the income and possibly qualify for the mortgages and doing all that, then it kind of becomes like a joint venture. So if you're able to work out something where both people are happy, then I think your relationship will be good and your outcome will probably be better as an investor as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. For us, for when we first started, it was just like understanding what Matt's fears were. And his fears were actually just, it had nothing to do with financial so much as it had to do with the tenants.
Oh yeah.
And the tenant potential nightmares, or them trashing the place, or having to take them to the landlord tenant board,
Hmm.
that kind of stuff. And so those were his fears. I'm like, okay. So his sister needed a place to live, and so we ended up starting with her. And in
Yeah.
our second house, I won't say how that ended, but the second house, I ended up finding tenants on Kijiji, and we talked for like 3 months, and then we found them first, and then we found a house,
Hmm.
and then he slowly got used to it over time, and that actually was how he became okay with it. I wouldn't say he loves real estate, but
Yeah.
he's okay with it now.
Well, yeah, I'm sure at this point he realizes that, hey, you had a vision and you knew what you wanted, and that vision has become a reality. So it's worthwhile. Everything you've put up with is worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Mhm.
somebody that wants to get started, do you have any specific advice for them? Like somebody that's, you know, just
Yeah.
starting out, first purchase potentially.
Yeah, get out of the idea that you need to buy where you live and buy in expensive markets, because a lot of people think I'll never be able to afford anything. I live in Oakville or wherever, Burlington, Mississauga. I can't afford anything here. You got to stop listening to what people are saying and think outside the box. If you can get something in an affordable area for 250, 300,000, or maybe even less, and get started that way, it'll really open up a lot of doors for you.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. So, George, it's always a pleasure having you. But this next part of the podcast is our lightning round. So, I'm going to ask you to give me the first answer that comes to mind. And there's 5 questions, and all the guests get the same question. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, question number 1. George, what is your favorite real estate investing book ever?
Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Oh, awesome. I should actually do a poll. I think probably 9 out of 10 people will say Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Hmm.
If I go down and like look from like podcast episode number 1. So if you're listening and you have not read Rich Dad Poor Dad, go read Rich Dad Poor Dad, because
Yeah.
clearly it's like 90% people's number 1 best
Yeah.
choice.
And don't just read it once. Like, I think I've read it maybe 4 or 5 times in the last 2 years or something. So definitely read it more than once.
Awesome.
Yeah.
George, what is your favorite podcast?
I like I like Oprah's Super Soul Conversations. I know it's a little bit different, but I think it just kind of it makes you feel good, because it's always kind of like it's people who are enlightened in some way. So I think that these people have a better understanding of life than most, and I think Oprah is that way as well. So I would say that's probably one of my favorites, or
Oh,
my
very
favorite.
cool. I
Yeah,
didn't know she had a podcast.
yeah. She's got. I think she's got more than one.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, question number 3. What is your favorite pastime? So what do you do for fun when you're not doing anything real estate related?
My favorite thing ever is basketball. I
Okay.
love playing. Yeah, I every morning I just like go to the gym and I work on my game for no reason. Like, I'm not a professional or anything like that, but I just love playing, and ever since I was a kid, when I was a kid I dreamt of playing at a high level. I don't think that's going to happen at this point, but it's fun to, like, when I'm playing pickup basketball or something, I can shoot pretty well. I can beat most average players, so it feels pretty good.
Very cool. Awesome. Question number 4. If you lost all of your money and your assets tomorrow, how would you start again?
Probably with looking for partners, because I've got the knowledge. So yeah, if I lost everything, I think it would be pretty easy to get started and make something happen for me and the person that I'm working with.
Okay, very cool. And last question, if somebody has $50,000 and they want to get started, how would you recommend they spend it?
Obviously, get yourself some real estate and try to turn that 50,000 into 100,000 by applying the BRRRR strategy, and then just keep recycling. And which is, I'm guessing, what most of your guests say, right?
No, not necessarily. We have a lot of different responses when it comes to that.
Yeah, a lot of people are into options trading now, which I think I don't. I haven't really tried that. I don't know. Have you ever done any options trading?
No, you know what?
Yeah,
It's so I have a Questrade account when it comes to like, my own stocks and stuff like that, but like
yeah.
I don't have the time. I'm not experienced, and to be honest, like learning it it's going to take
Yeah.
time. So I'd rather just personally, for me, I just stick to real estate as much as
Hmm.
possible, and then whatever stocks I decide I want to buy here and there on Questrade.
Right, right. Cool.
But yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so George, where can our listeners find you if they wanted to reach out and know more?
Welloff.ca. It's my website, or you can email me, george@welloff.ca.
Very cool. And
Yep.
George, any final last words of advice?
Yeah, I just hope that people don't just listen and they actually take action, because that's the biggest thing. It's fear that holds most people back, just like Matt, I guess. And pushing through that fear will really change your life. So that's it.
Awesome. Thanks for being on Where Should I Invest, George. It was a pleasure having you. And George, you're also a regular at the Right Club,
Yep.
one of the clubs that I'm a co-host with. So if you guys want to meet George in person, come out to the club in Burlington. Otherwise, reach out to George. And I think you're on Instagram as well.
Yep. Welloff X.
Welloff X?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
On that note, George, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for listening to Where Should I Invest with your host, Sarah Larbi. Make sure to listen in next time. We'll catch you on the next episode of Where Should I Invest?